My name is Vonnie Estes, and I'm the Vice President of Technology for the Produce Marketing Association. So what I'm passionate about is working with new technologies, but getting them adopted by growers and producers. So we've got all this great technology that's coming towards us, a lot from medical biotech and a lot from digital companies, and it's coming towards agriculture, but we really need to help kind of navigate and translate so that this technology starts getting used on the farm and getting the advantages that we can from it. Well, some of the roadblocks are around the technology itself. It's like you can't expect some person who has a PhD in robotics from Stanford or Oxford or somebody to understand how to farm. So they say, "Oh, I've got this great robot here." But there really needs to be work done with the growers so that we make sure that the technology that we have is creating some kind of value. So I think, a lot of it, they're saying, oh, well, farmers aren't adopting. It's not that, it's that the technology's not ready. And so really looking at, some of the things around AI and machine learning. Yes, we've got all of these great programs, but what's the data set and what is the data really telling the grower in a way that they can make better decisions? Because if the technology isn't causing more profitability or making the producer's life easier, then they're not going to adopt it. Why would they? The roadblocks in the way in biotech and in breeding and particularly in gene editing vary by country. So in the US, where I operate from, we've got a great green light from the US Department of Agriculture and saying that if there's a mutation that could happen in nature, they're not going to regulate it, which is great and allowing a lot of innovation to happen. But the roadblocks are no longer regulatory, but there's still some consumer concern about gene editing. Consumers don't really know what to think of it and how it's going to get accepted. And so because consumers are concerned, retailers are concerned. So because retailers are concerned, farmers are saying, I'm not sure I'm going to grow it. Therefore, people who are developing germplasm that would use gene editing are saying, if no one in that chain is going to buy my product, why would I spend, $1 million in 5 years developing it? So I think that's changing because we're starting to really look at traits and improvements that could really benefit the consumer. So if we can lead with the benefits to the consumer, I think it'll pull the technology all the way through the trade. So I'm excited about that. In Europe, we've got a regulatory issue, which means that gene editing is treated the same way as GMOs. Which means it's millions of dollars and euros and many, many years to get something to market, and that's just a whole different decision. And then it may not be accepted by consumers. And it's different in different areas. Japan just said that they were going to accept it not as GMO. Argentina accepts it not as GMO. So it depends on regulation. Another big barrier, because of what I just said, that it's all different in different countries, is trade. So if you are a germplasm producer, say in the US, and say you grow grapes, so you produce germplasm for grapes and you also sell grapes. Well, if you use gene editing, you have to keep everything separate, and you can't sell, you may develop this amazing new variety for grapes, and that's going to take you, even with gene editing, it's going to take you 10 years to get it to market, and then you can't sell it in Europe. And so you can't sell the germplasm, you can't sell the grapes. So that's another big barrier, and people are having to think that through in their strategies of where to spend their R&D dollars. So the Arctic apple is a RNAi technology, which is considered GMO, which is what's fascinating about watching how that's being accepted in the U.S. And they have used genetic modification to stop the apples from browning. So it's an enzyme that they delete out that they can stop the apple from browning after it's been cut. Huge benefit to school lunches, to anyone who eats apples. So they're doing test marketing in a couple states in the U.S., and there doesn't seem to be a negative outcry from consumers. From what I've read, people are liking it, trying it, liking it, and so I think that those are the types of products that we need to get onto the market, where people just see the benefit and feel safe about the product, because we don't want people to be afraid of their food, and we just need to communicate the benefits. Another one that's out in the market right now is the innate potato by Simplot, and so that's being sold to food service, and it's another non-browning trait. So and it also, some of the enzymatic changes that happen in potatoes once they've been cut, those don't happen either, which have in the past had some food safety issues. But so it's a sustainable, safer, great potato. And so that's out on the market right now in food service. There's the pink pineapple, which Dole and Del Monte are both working on, and it has pink flesh instead of yellow flesh. But it's also been, and it's a very traditional GMO. They've brought in genes that keep the pineapple from flowering, which is an agronomic trait, but they've also brought in genes that cut down some of the allergenicity to pineapple, along with sweeter flavor and the color. So that's being grown in Costa Rica and someplace else outside of the U.S., and will be introduced into the U.S. in the next year or so. So that's one that will be very fascinating to see how consumers accept it, because it's got so many benefits. And it'll be labeled, people will know. No one's trying to pretend it's not GMO, but we'll see if people, love the traits so much that, they'll buy it. Well, there's so much work that's being done around the world with gene editing, and but it's all very much in the research phase. And so I think some of the early wins with gene editing is going to be disease resistance, and so that'll be a big one, because it's easy to do with it's easier to do with gene editing, that you can make a crop resistant. So I think we'll see crop resistant genes as far as agronomics, which, if you can talk to a consumer long enough, that's a really exciting consumer trait too, because you're using a lot less pesticides. So from the sustainability angle, disease resistance is really important. We're also going to see probably a lot of these non-browning type of traits, because that's easier to do. So what that does to the consumer is that it can stay in your refrigerator longer. Say you had lettuce, there isn't one available now, but if there were, if you had lettuce that didn't brown as fast, you could use it probably a week longer. So that also has a value chain benefit of sustainability. So you're gonna have less food waste. So that's a really good one. People are working on color, looking at making different colors, which is just a novelty. And then I think as we move forward, people will work more on things like taste and nutrition and those benefits that consumers will go for. I was really disappointed, because I really thought it was an opportunity that Europe could take a slightly different tact and allow innovation to continue to develop in Europe. And I was disappointed because it wasn't a decision based on science, it was a decision based on the legal definition of a word. And so, they decided, the lawyers said, well, this is GMO, it fits the same legal definition, and it didn't really look at the benefits and the innovation and kind of the unintended consequences of that ruling. So a lot of the work is just, moving out of Europe. The breeding isn't going to happen here, the development of science isn't going to happen here, and then it's not going to develop as a market. And I think it'll continue to put Europe further behind as far as any kind of competitive advantage, and that's not good for the science and for the economies and for sustainability and for consumers getting better products. No, because then we can't sell to Europe, so I don't know. There may be niches that it might be better, but I don't think so. I think being able to have a market you can trade worldwide with your product is a bigger advantage. So I don't really see it as a benefit. So my main messages, I think, to the lawmakers and the people involved in setting policy in Europe would be to really step back and take a look at the advantages and understand the science around gene editing and see that that would be a great advantage in Europe to have this innovation, to develop this innovation, and to develop the kind of traits that gene editing can develop in crops, which less food waste, more sustainable, less inputs. And by stopping that kind of innovation in Europe, it really puts Europe at an economic disadvantage and competitive advantage, but it also hurts innovation in the whole world because it kind of puts the brakes on the work that other people are doing because we can't ship here and develop technology for Europe. The GMO papayas, it saved the industry in Hawaii because there was a disease that was just knocking them all out. And so they used genetic modification to save that crop. And so, yes, I eat papayas.
Great.